And because I don't have a co-host, if people would, I would definitely appreciate if I forget when we come back from breakout rooms to re-record, please let me know and I'll make sure I hit that link for us. We do always start with a land, labor, and global recognition acknowledgement, if we will. Recognizing that in my region, we are on the traditional lands of the Nisqually, Cowlitz, and Puget Sound Salish people. I will put in a couple of resources. One is a map so you can see where you are if you don't know already. And it's a start for us to, again, recognize what has come before and the struggles, the strengths, the recognition. I have this slide from a colleague that I appreciate, that it's a start toward decolonizing relationships with people and place. I also have some resources on the racial injustice acknowledgement. And feel free at any of these, whether you have something to share regarding land acknowledgements, or if you have resources on cultural acknowledgements, please put them into the chat. I think that this is a great opportunity for us to learn from each other. I do have a couple things on Black History Month that I'll add into the chat box here. And when we're talking about the intersectionality, as you see in this slide, between those who identify as persons of color and individuals with disabilities, I think a lot about subtle acts of exclusion. And that's actually a book I was recommending to someone today. How to understand, identify, and stop microaggressions. And it's just thinking about how can we make sure that we are all including others and not excluding, and recognizing the importance of being human. So just a few things to share as we start off. And as we start, as people are coming in, I just have some reminders that I do ask that you please rename yourself on your Zoom so we know where you're coming from. It helps give us some context. Thank you, Teresa, for putting private kindergarten, but we also have a map that you can add on so we can see where you're from. Like, for example, Nancy is in Spokane. Nancy, it looks like even though my trip out there, the end of this month is filled, we are in talks about having another date set up later in the spring. So I'll let you all know when that comes up. In fact, if you want to get on my mailing list, go ahead and just put your email in the chat box and I'll make sure that you learn about new opportunities when they come up. Let me grab the attendance link though for people who've come in since the last time I did. A few other things. So to rename yourself, you go to the participants list, go to your name. Next to it, you'll see more. There is one of the options is to rename yourself. And everyone has been muted upon entry, so that shouldn't be a problem. But if you, when you want to contribute, not if, but when, please use that unmute button there. And unless you are Betsy, Heather, Teresa, Deb, LaDonna, or Dana, I can't see you. So if you do this, thank you, Angela, but you could at least type in your thoughts. So unless they're one of the few people whose videos are on my first screen, I mean, I can click over to other screens. Hello, Karen and Kevin. Then you'll need to raise your electronic hand. You can find that under the reactions button. That's where you'll find the raise hand opportunity. And we will be writing on the screen. So that's the annotations. Up at the top of the screen, where you're just testing that. I think that was just testing that feature. Up at the top where it says you're viewing my screen, next to it, you see where it says view options. You can click that and you'll get a toolbar that comes up. And if you want to write with things, that little red dot will change the color of whatever you're writing with. And then you'll find stamps here and you can find all kinds of, play around and explore the different options there. These are icons to indicate your involvement, engagement, the reminders and their places and things that I'm trying to infuse, whether they be connections to equity, because really the equity is, literacy is equity. It's really empowerment. And that's just really what drives me. And so I'm trying to make sure that what I do and think implicitly is explicit. And so that's where I'm trying to do it with all of these many guideposts. I really need to stop because there are quite a few there. But when it's a handout, it's something you can print up and take with you. An activity is an opportunity to engage. Time to reflect will be for either oral or writing, and that's your choice. I'll try to make the breakout rooms a little larger so that if there are people who are engaging or not engaging, and that's a choice time for you to verbalize, to internalize, or write to remember. Practical strategies are something you can do with your students that they would benefit from. And in this case, because you see that icon on the top of the page here, the practical strategy is having an icon, which is a nonverbal reminder. Oftentimes, even hand gestures are really useful for some of our students so that they are getting a cue and they can be thinking, and instead of having to read, number one, but two, it's just a support for us all to help us keep us on track. And then the electronic resources are something that is I'll put in the chat box for you. Okay, so we always start off also with the teaching and learning beliefs of my agency. So I'll give you a moment to pause. I'll pause for a moment and just see what's connecting. Where are you connecting today? What's something that you want to call out from this list, or something that you think you would like to add to? Thanks, LaDonna, for starting with the relationships. Kevin's adding growth mindset. Let me get my annotations on so I can add in what comes into the chat for us. Oops. I'll move that over here, get a stamp 2. It's funny you mentioned that, Kevin, because just this morning I was talking with a group who offered classes, and they were even paying the teachers to attend, not just free classes, but they were paying teachers to attend, and only 3 showed up. And it's like, how do we help people? I said, well, maybe people are overwhelmed. They've got a lot on their plates. Maybe they didn't know about it. I think that and that comes back to the building relationship piece. These classes are still open, Kevin, although we are nearing the end of this series. I will be doing this again. That's a good question, when I will be doing this again. This short series I won't be doing again, but I do have, yes, I'll put the attendance back in for you, Melissa. I do have longer series where I have an entire day about each of these topics instead of just 2 hours. And even there's one class in June where, when I clear all this off, I'll get you that link for it. In June, I'll be doing kind of a shorter 1 day, but a bit of phonology, and not phonology. We're doing sound symbol correspondences, syllabification, and morphology. So it's a bit of orthography and morphology together. So I'll pull that up in a moment. I just wanted to give people a moment to connect here. Thank you with you on that. Isn't that what drives us all? Why are we here? Because students can learn, and that's what drives. That's why we do what we do. And of course, we need curriculum. Those are the tools, but we also need the professional development to know what to do with those tools. All right, I'm going to go ahead and clear that off. If there's anything else you'd like to add, you can go ahead and put it in the chat. So let me clear all drawings. And I'm going to draw our attention to the opportunities for attending additional classes. And I can't do it with my check mark here. Let me clear that. I need to have my other, no worries, Stephanie, I'll take care of that. So I'm going to put this whole link in here for you. So rather than each individual, but here at so this is the OSPI dyslexia page. And you'll notice the professional learning here on the right. The first bullet is webinars that Glean put on for us last year that we have recordings of. The second bullet are the Glean asynchronous classes that are free for everyone. And the third bullet is my list of classes. I'll go ahead and click that and pull that up for you. And show you that, so we are right now in this series, and today actually we're talking about syntax and fluency, but we'll be doing a full 6 hours of that in April. We have a 6-hour class in I just had one on syllabification orthography. March will be doing morphology, and with that 6 hours, it's actually, it looks longer because it is 8:30 to 4, but we take an hour lunch. And we do 2 15-minute breaks because I don't want, nobody wants to stay, no worries, Stephanie. Nobody wants to stay in Zoom for 6 hours straight. I try to make it manageable by doing 4 90-minute chunks on all of those. So here's the one that's in June, so people don't have to take a day off work to come to those. So those are some of the opportunities available to everyone. Okay, so thank you for that. I do also have how we work together. I sometimes call these requests, sometimes I call them norms, although I'm trying to get away from the term norms. I want to normalize differences and normalize being human and imperfect. So I just wanted to pause for a moment again and give you the opportunity. Is there something here that you would like to connect with? And as someone said in a training I was in the other day, to hold today, to have as a goal perhaps? Or is there something that I'm missing that you think is important for how we engaged with each other? Thank you, LaDonna, sorry. I also asked that you share too, so I can learn from you. That's the why I added the share openly. I think it used to be speak your truth. But I think that's for me coming, if you're going to be sharing openly, it's from the heart and it includes your truth. Some of them, these are adapted from the Center for Ethical Leadership's norms. And the grace one, don't think that was theirs, but that's one of the things that's most important to me. And I started doing that during the pandemic, and I can't let go of that because we still have a lot going on, don't we? All right, thank you for everyone who's contributing to that. And we're going to go to the outline next. No worries, Michelle. I'll put let's see if I have the attendance link for people who came in late. Grab that, and then I'll go ahead and move off of this page. Clear that, thank you. Clear all drawings. And look at the outline of where we've been, where we're going. We do have someone who's just joining us today, so you can take a look at where the other classes that we've discussed. Now, I have been recording them. I forget that my secretary is transferring them to a source where I don't have to lose them. But in the meantime, you can all access them through these resources in our, here we go, structured literacy instruction. They only stay, these versions, oh, it's gone. I'll have to grab that again. These versions expire after 30 days. So that one's still good, the previous versions from this series. But then you can see we have some YouTube converted ones, and that's what's in the process also. So if you would like to still engage in the content from some of the previous ones, you can look at those. And hopefully that sharing is setting on that for you. Yes, everyone is a viewer, and I'll put that into the chat box. You can see all the resources that I collect for each of these classes as well as recordings. Okay, at this point in time, I like to pause and give people an opportunity to unmute, engage. What are some things that have been you've been thinking about since the last time? We did a lot last time when we were talking about morphemes and how they change words, either when we pronounce them or when we write them. And of course, we grow our vocabulary through knowing about morphemes and how they change words, whether they change their direction, and we see connections among words. We didn't get into the etymology much, but I might go back a little bit to touch on some of those things, although I did put them into the Jamboard for us to engage with. But I just want to give people an open opportunity to share with something you've been reflecting, something that might have come up since we last met last week, or that we want to kind of process together. So you can unmute or raise your electronic hand if you feel like more than one person. Hi, Robert. I'll add the attendance link for you again. Welcome.
Hi.
Hi, Kevin. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. SSD, is that Seattle School District?
Yes.
Okay.
So I've worked in a lot of different positions as a substitute. Currently, my position is as a long-term sub PE teacher.
Mhm.
But I work with students who are first generation. English is their second language, and some of them may have little or no experience. So just reflecting on how I communicate, uh, just slowing down how I speak, making eye contact, and just kind of like every time I see that student, just kind of practicing the basics with them. Um, so that's kind of where I'm at as a PE teacher. Just I speak a little Spanish, but just really trying to establish those basic norms of hello, how are you, and getting them to go through those motions of repeating, kind of reflecting what I'm saying to them back to me. But I get a little bit in as a PE teacher.
Thank you, Kevin. You also made me think about how important these guideposts are for our second language learners. It's an icon rather than words that can give a cue, and how important in PE, for your second language learners and or your kids with language learning difficulties or reading difficulties, that when you say, go line up, or maybe have an icon or an image of what that looks like, so
Mm-hmm.
they know your expectations from it. This is the completed, here's a picture of that, or trying
Yeah,
to.
I've been trying to think about or brainstorm ways that can create inclusivity as well. One idea for a game is like, you have a ball and you can throw that word, that vocabulary. So it's kind of a little bit of cross-curricular activity where you're getting some language arts and PE activity together, but also including maybe some Spanish words or Somali or other things, so that they also feel like, okay, other students are learning their language as well. Haven't implemented that yet, but just some ideas that are rolling around.
You can have them break the words into syllables.
Yeah,
You throwing the ball one syllable at a time. When my daughter was younger, we once made like a, well, you chalk on the thing, we'll throw the hopscotch, and with different numbers of syllables. And so I would give her a word, and she would, or she would roll the dice, and it would be that number of when, and she'd come up with a word with that number of syllables, and so things we could play with that way as well.
that's great.
So a lot we can do on that. Thanks, Kevin, for sharing. Is there anyone else who would like to kind of do some reflection before we move forward? Heather Joy, I love that you're doing some stretches as you're listening.
I'll go ahead.
Hi, LaDonna.
Um, I have been now like more interested in trying to figure out where the origin of words come from. I'm a para, so we work on specific words. Do I have time to look it up on my website link that you gave us? No, but I sure enough like go, oh, I wish I knew where it came from and why we spell it this way or why we say it like this. So that's what I've kind of gotten this last couple weeks.
Did I share with you last time my new favorite book? I think someone said yes, they used it with their kids. Once Upon a
Yeah.
Word Origin Dictionary for kids. Oh my goodness, it says dizzy, came from Old English dizig, meant foolish. It's always so interesting learning.
Yeah, I might have to get a book instead of just going online because I won't have time as a parent to go online.
Well,
Thanks.
and either way, if you could do it with the kids, you could say, you know what, that's a really good question. Let's look that up. So we can encourage them to become reading researchers and curious. I was a guest in a fourth grade class once and trying to talk about, remember last time when we talked about the doubling versus the dropping and why hopping has two P's and hoping has one. And I know how empowering that was for my kids when I would teach them that at Chartwell. And I would say, now go home and ask your parents if they know why hopping has two P's and hoping has one, because you do. Isn't that cool? And some of these kids for whom this came really easily, they said, Miss, who cares? It just is. And I said, because if you know how to read these words or write these words that follow this pattern, you can read and write any words that follow this pattern. And it saddened me that they weren't curious anymore, that we had killed that curiosity. So maybe regardless of their age, if we are curious too, we can help them maybe rekindle some of that. So thank you, LaDonna. All right, well, let's jump in. We do, so I used to keep in like a warm up together, but frankly, there's not much time. So I think those have kind of shied away, but I will bring up our Jamboard here for you to engage, and I'll do a little Jamboard tour for everyone. Give you an opportunity to introduce yourself, especially since we do have someone new. In the chat, also via the Jamboard, where's the place for that? I'll just put it up here for us and worry about everything else later. Okay. So the Jamboard we have, the first page just tells you what class this is, and then we have a second page which tells you where you're from. And if you've never used Jamboard before, you can just add in a sticky note and put in who you are or where, and also what you do. I'm obviously ESD 113, but I also contract with OSPI. And you could save it, then cancel, and then grab it and move it to wherever you are. I think we have most people in here, but definitely not all, because we have, I think, how many with us? 49 people. So we don't have everyone here. If you can't get in because sometimes it jams up from being too many people, just come back in later. So you'll see some opportunities to engage that way. There's also a parking lot for questions or thoughts, and luckily it has not been like that lately. We've had some beautiful weather. And then we have the structural literacy overview. Right now we're focusing in orthographic knowledge, but also the fluency, reading and writing. Actually, we're talking about reading and writing fluency right now, because when we're talking about grammar and syntax, that is the link between reading individual words to reading words in phrases and clauses and with prosody. And that's a link I wish that we really focused more on, was that necessary grammatical link there. So I'm going to just pause. The rest of the stuff past this one are some other things that we can engage in. Okay. So, but we do have someone who is new. So I just want to give a little bit of a background for who I am and the work that I do. I try not to repeat myself for people who were with me before. And if the person who is new to us today has already had classes with me, just put that in the chat box and I'll not need to talk so much. So just a brief, I taught at an elementary school for kids with dyslexia, though I was prepared to be a secondary English teacher and also an ESL teacher. And instead I got a job at a school for kids with dyslexia. From there, oh, thank you, Christy. Yes, I remember having you in. So anyway, I've done the elementary, middle, high school, special education at the university level. And I'm so lucky that I get to engage in this work with all of you and constantly be learning and reading more so that I can share, and definitely thank you. Appreciate for the people who've added those in. Okay, so if you know me already, I think I shared the top picture before, but I've added this one. Myrna Soul on the bottom left was my Slingerland mentor, and just is my Slingerland mentor. That she is a tutor in Portland. With her is LaDerek Horn, who I think last week I shared the Black and Dyslexic series. That was LaDerek Horn's series. And if I haven't, let me know. I'll put it in the chat box again for you. And then Era Jackson, we worked together she was from OSPI. She's the one on the bottom right. She's now with Seattle Public Schools as the assessment director. And she and I worked together both with the dyslexia, but also with the Washington Reading Corps. So feel free to please, like I said, put something in the chat, put something on the map. Let's, as we again build these relationships, I definitely appreciate people sharing, and we'll get to know each other a little bit more as we work together. But we're going to jump into syntax and phrases. This was the result of 52 of the 50 of you, so fantastic. Hopefully everyone here had a chance to fill this out. If you didn't, I'm going to put it into the chat box because we do have a couple new people. And these are the responses from this group on your comfort level and knowledge with syntax. So you'll notice from everything from 1 to 10, and our highest is in the middle there. So it's just good to keep in mind as we share with each other that we have a very heterogeneous group, and let's obviously be kind and supportive of each other and learn from each other. I do have some reminders, and sometimes I will add in different ways of looking at things we've talked about in the past. So earlier on in this series, we talked about the simple view of reading. And I think that this is just a good reminder of the fact that we need to make sure, I mean, just like Kevin was saying with his kids, they need to develop their language comprehension skills as well as their word recognition skills. So we need to make sure that we're helping our kids understand what those words mean, which is what we were starting to talk about last week when we were talking about morphemes, as well as be able to get them off the page, which is the word recognition skills that we worked on with syllabification, sound symbol correspondences, and the phonology previous to that. So we need all these pieces, and there's a lot going on to learning to read, isn't there? So this is of course, our goal is that reading comprehension, but it's just a reminder too, if you'll remember, this is the key piece here, that it is a multiplication equation, not an addition, because you need both of these. Remember, if either of these were 0, your outcome would be 0. And remember that it's not static within a student. You can be strong or weak with your language comprehension, dependent on the passage's vocabulary and syntax. So this is where we're connecting it to what we're talking about today with syntax. The grammatical construction can make it more or less difficult, because when we're reading, we encounter syntax that we don't encounter in our natural speech. However, how often do we see whilst, or we use the word, even however or although, we don't use all that much with those kinds of constructions or appositives. So what we read tends to be more complex than how we say things. And so this is a key piece for our language learners, but also our kids with language disabilities, learning disabilities, especially when it comes to language and dyslexia. So this is really key piece to keep in mind, that the language comprehension is very complex, and it's more than just individual word meaning. All right, so let me just explain what I mean by this a little bit more. I'm just going to bring up our kids here. My first one, he's strong at his language comprehension. He understands words if you say them to him, and he can get the words off the page. You notice his little book is an ABC book, though, so he's really understanding what he's reading. However, if you gave him a different book like protein kinases, or if you gave me something on engineering, an advanced math book or biology, he and I could sound those things out, where a word reading is just fine. But it's the language comprehension where we might struggle, and how those words are used. I have a great example where I give people a list of words, and they know all those words. They know what those words are, but how they're used, it's completely a mystery, because they don't have the background knowledge. So this language comprehension also includes my knowledge about the topic. So again, in this, obviously, because remember we had that multiplication symbol, this would mean weaker reading comprehension as a result, because I am weaker in one of those two areas. And most of our kids with dyslexia come with a strong language comprehension. It's the word reading that is their difficulty, resulting in their weak reading comprehension. But if we give them an audio text, that can really support their reading comprehension skills, because they're getting it both in their ears and their eyes. So just one reminder as we think about how this all fits together in what our kids need as they're learning to read and write. Okay, as we jump into syntax, we're going to have just a fun warm-up. And the practical strategy here is to prime kids' brains with what they're going to be thinking about what they already know, and stretching and hearing from each other so that we can work together to solve a puzzle or a problem in this case. So we have a bunch of letters, not the individual words. That's easy. We have the dog ate the bone. What do all those rest of those letters mean? Let's put it in the chat box and come out with it together. Erica started with the top. The S is sentence. Keep us going, people. And a noun phrase. So we've got, I'll write these, at least check them off. We have sentence and we have noun phrase. We have two of those, don't we? Betsy has N for noun. We have two of those. Now I see V for verb and a verb phrase. You were fast on the typing there, Erica. The D is a hard one. And frankly, it's one I don't care whether or not we know. I would call the word.
I've always been told it was actually an adjective.
It's actually an article, but an article is
But technically, article is an adjective.
yes, but
Okay.
this is a specific kind of an adjective that could be called a determiner.
That's it. Thank you.
Determiner is what that D is. So whether or not we got that, I don't care. I would always just call them articles. It's easier for our kids. But a determiner is the articles, but it's also the adjectival indicators, if you want to call them, like this and that are determiners like their articles as well. Well, we went through that quickly, didn't we? Which is great because we have lots to do. So I'll clear all that off. Thanks for your support and help, Erica. Don't forget to put where you're from on your Zoom thing. And let's talk about why is this grammar important? So remember how I said that what we read? Oh, I don't, Dan. So I want to go back to that, Dan. Not only do they struggle, you say multilinguals struggle with the difference between a and the.
Yes, yes.
It's not only the multilingual learners, but also our kids with dyslexia. And I'll tell you why. So the first piece, it's helpful to help our kids recognize that the refers to a specific one. And could be anyone. I went to a doctor. This is why I went to a doctor. I went to the doctor who's at the hospital. Now I know specifically which one I'm talking about. But you're right, Dan, it doesn't always work that way easily. And this is where language gets complicated, is if we ask native speakers whether or not you put a the before something, it all depends. I mean, for example, in England, they go to hospital and we go to the hospital. It's complex. Our kids with dyslexia don't necessarily, their trouble with the and is because they're unstressed. Remember that our language is a stress time language, and they have an easier time with the words that are content words. They have meaning behind them, that like dog and bone. The dog ate the bone. So that's where let me put their color back on here. This is where the emphasis is on this sentence is with dog and bone. The other ones, we kind of swallow them. And so it's harder. They're not as recognized. I tried to draw it. Dan, go ahead. You wanted to add something more. I could see that.
That's good for now.
Sounds good. Okay, but yes, you're completely correct. So this is where I'm saying that it becomes more complex as they get older. Number one, and what they see in writing is different from speech. So we have to support them in both ways. So just a quote from Louisa Moats, who again wrote this speech to print. Highly, highly recommend if you want to dive deeper into all of these topics. But as we get older, notice how this is saying beginning in those intermediate grades, that my need to understand academic language, so we're starting to think about the vocabulary, including my ability to understand complex or literary syntax, that those grammatical constructions that we only see in print, it becomes more and more important and highly correlated and influential with that reading comprehension. So to think about the needs to help our students understand syntax. So what do we mean by syntax? We mean the relationships between words or among words, phrases, clauses, and sentences. It answers questions about written texts. So these color codes are going to be important in a moment, and you'll understand why here. But the answers questions like where, when, how much, who or what, did what, doing what, which one, what kind, how many, why. So this is how words in context make sense. If we have just an individual word, it means nothing until it's in relation with other words. Because so many of our words in our language are polysemous, they have more than one meaning. Remember, like I said, for example, the word bat, there's a great example. Someone told me that my grandfather, did I tell you the one about the bank? My grandfather and I went to the bank, but then it was actually a riverbank. So you think about the context, and the other words around it really influence its meaning. So I'm going to show you how to get to this handout as a takeaway for you. Now, I will say that I have two versions, an easy quick version or I'll get you the easy quick version because that's easier for us. So let me get my thing here. Awesome. I love seeing more people join in with this. So we're going to go to our resources. And if you need this again, let me know. Notice how it has those handouts here. We're going to follow that handout link. And we're going to go to, there are two places, you'll find it in the Frank and Franken handouts, but I also pulled out our grammar questions. So that's something that we were just looking at those questions. Notice how I have my color coding. I didn't, on the last one, Erica, we just had the questions. Notice the orange ones, which one, what kind, how many, those are our adjectives and our articles. I lumped those together these were the ones I used for my kids. It was funny, one of my colleagues who came up with this color coding at Chartwell, she said she did it randomly, but I have since really appreciated having at least the nouns and pronouns in green and the verbs in red, and I'll tell you why. But once I became a parent and my kids were working on a handwriting app, there was one that was helping the kids know where to start and where to stop. And the little creature said, we follow the rules of the road. We start with green means go, and we end with red, which means stop. And I'm like, this is just like my grammar things. So I would have these posters on the wall, and I have posters I can show to you later where I'd have the noun and I have the verb. So a simple sentence has at least a noun and a verb, doesn't it? A red and a green. There you go. You have your simple sentence. Those other pieces are things we can add, but then the color coding also became kind of shorthand. So when I would say, okay, you've got a purple, you have a preposition. What do we have to have after it, everybody? We have to have a green. To me, for me, around the table, around the ugly, on top of the ugly, scattered, piled up table. You've got lots of adjectives and articles, but you still have to have that noun there somewhere. So just helping my kids, this was a shorthand by using these colors to support them, as well as, and then it's something that I then used supportive colors for color coding with markers. We also, if you do Microsoft products, OneLook, you can color code and have them change the colors of nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. So those are some tips that you can do with that. Okay, so that was the, excuse me, the handout there. And then the practical strategy here is that helping our kids recognize which words have meaning and which are grammatical glue. So remember when we talked about content and function words, those contents contain meaning. When we were talking about morphemes last week, nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, and then the function words holding things together, like the conjunctions, and but, and for, and nor, and your prepositions, pronouns, helping verbs, articles, they hold things together. So this is another way of looking at it. Margie Gillis calls them the building blocks of sentences. So you can see I changed the colors to mine, of course, but how do these work together to create sentences? And I'm using the word jobs intentionally here. And the activity here, I was going to ask you to write your own definitions, but in interest of time, I'm just going to give you a couple of things and then let you talk to each other soon about it. So here are some definitions that I used when I was teaching. Notice that they go along with the questions that were on that handout. And thank you for reminding me, Deborah, that everyone is welcome to take screenshots. And if there's anything that you want a picture of and you weren't able to get your own screenshots or snip and sketch, let me know. I'd be happy to send a copy of it to you. Just put a request into the chat box on anything or email me. So you notice these definitions. I don't have article on here. I didn't really have a lot of room, but the articles will give you the articles. One, there are only 3 of them. And it's funny, I remember teaching a high school group and one of my students gets so frustrated with her colleagues. She's like, A, and the, that's it. Guys, A, and the, there aren't any others, 8 more articles, A, and the. So that's a good, easy one. Although, as Dan helped us remind us that they can be, the meaning can be difficult, but that also helps you know whether or not you have a noun. If you can put an article before it, it's a noun. An idea, a brilliant idea, a piece of information. So even if it's abstract, you can still be put an article before it, you know you've got a noun. So hence that idea that's a little vague there. Okay, I think this is something you all know, the what, but it is also useful having a label for our kids so that we are talking about it. That this preposition shows this relationship. It's funny, my daughter was just learning about these recently in 7th grade. I'm like, really? 7th grade? You haven't learned about this before? That's okay. We're going to keep going. We're going to help you with this. We're going to get there. Because it's better late than never, right, everyone? But especially remember last time we were talking about that ly. And here's another suffix in ful. My base word is care. And I've added 2 suffixes to help me recognize, remember that a consonant E here, if it's not in a car, it's a care. We've got that E affecting that vowel sound. But we've got a couple of suffixes where care, I can take care. It's something I can have. I have care. I am careful. Oh, now that's describing me. I've made it into an adjective, but carefully now I've made it into an adverb. So remember all those changes we were talking about last time with morphemes. Okay, other things that we want to just draw attention to here. No, but I'm going to give you an opportunity to participate in something in just a moment, because what I want to draw attention to here, particularly, is this word here, syntactic roles, or on the last one, you saw the word syntactic jobs. So I'm going to pause for a minute think about why I'm using those words, jobs or roles, instead of the label, your parts of speech. Let's think about how many different ways we could use each of these words. I bet all of you could come up with an example of how you could use these words as a noun, a verb, and an adjective. So I'm going to give you a moment, come up with your words or your sentences, put a little maybe simple one in the chat box, and let's see if we can come up with, pick any word, a sentence, at least one for each. I know we don't have a lot of time for that, but make sure we have at least a noun, a verb, an adjective in there. So I'm going to give you a moment. Erica, you want to say it orally? Go ahead. I'll type.
It's more that I have a funny story to go with one of them.
Okay.
In college, I did a lot of rock climbing, and to make sure that you were safe for rock climbing and that the person who had your rope, you'd say on belay as like a question, and they'd say belay on. Okay, go ahead and climb. And somebody goes, no, you got to change it. And they go, you say rock. And the other person says rock on. And I always thought that was funny because basically I was saying a noun, rock. And the response was rock on verb. But I don't know why that made me think of that. I had to share that funny story.
But I love it. And you were seeing some of those similar things what I'm seeing in the chat box. You rock my world. So there, you're right. It could be a verb. The rock is gray. The rock. So now it's a noun. And I rock back and forth. There's a verb. You rock. There's a verb. I threw a rock. There's a noun. You rock my world. That rock is fingers. The cookie is rock hard. There we go. There's an adjective. All right. We've got at least one of those each. Rocking my babies to sleep. Don't rock the boat. Look at all these different ways for rock. We all wanted to start with that one, huh? The spotted cat. So you might have to add a suffix to that. Exactly. I spotted the spotted cat who sat on a spot of sunshine, perhaps. Let me erase that off. See what's coming up. I'm going to sock you in the arm. You're a rock. Stand in that spot. We are a few more. See what you want to think of the ones that I got. But notice the color coding I did. There's, that as you were, if I took your sentences and color coded them, you can see your verbs there. You are rock. I bet that's an adjective. Like, it sounds like you're cool. Sock puppet. Oh, that's a great one. Sock drawer. I like sock puppet. The ski jump was steep. Oh, you came up with the same that I had, Christina. I jumped in the puddle, and it's the jump rope. Although jump rope, the jump is modifying and telling me about the rope. What kind of rope? A jump rope. Oh, and you know what? It is. Oh, I think that's what you were going for. Jump rope, jump shot. You were looking for an adjective. Versus ski jump, that's a noun. Just a little bit of fun with that so we can help our kids see. Now, Dan, when you talk about your multilingual learners, I think that Kevin brought them up too. Look at how words can have these, and remember we talked about the term polysemous, these multiple meanings. They also have multiple usages. And that's why we have to help our kids recognize that it could be used in a different way. Jumping is fun. Awesome, Erica. But remember that, yes, it is a gerund, and remember gerunds are nouns because something is, therefore it's the subject of that sentence. Okay, I'm going to let you keep, as you are exploring those for a moment, I'm going to start making the breakout rooms because in our next slide, I'm going to give you the prompt. I just want you to have a moment to one that you process with each other and think about, talking about the jobs of words rather than thinking about them as parts of speech. If you are in a room and you want to be, for example, if you're in a physical space, you need to be with other people, or if you want to go with other people, actually maybe make one more room on that just for that purpose, for moving people around, let me know. And I'm going to see 9 minutes should be good because our rooms are 4 or 5. And let me pause the recording and I'll give you time to chat. I'm going to shift the. All right, so I've resumed recording for the people who are not able to be with us. And I'd love to hear from some of the groups, some of the conversation you had. I will say that I had a little bit of this on my own because my kids are now home. And I went upstairs and found my daughter doing a homework on the parts of speech. And she said, well, I have to also see what, pick different branches off, different kinds of nouns. And I said, well, count and noun count, concrete and abstract, and common versus proper. And so she's wrestling with this too. I said, great timing. So who would like to share? Betsy, you're unmuted. Would you like to share for your group?
I think we just decided that it was so interesting to use words differently in different contexts. And we reflected on the use of the word bank, that you had said. And then I shared that as a teacher in a rural area in Kansas, I'd introduced the word elevator one day, thinking my 7th graders were thinking as I was, that it was that mechanical device in a building that lifted people from floor to floor, but they were thinking about the grain elevator out by the railroad tracks.
So is there a lifting elevator and a grain elevator, or in that case, is a grain elevator just another word for a silo?
I don't know. I've told you everything I know about grain elevator.
Thank you, Betsy.
Somebody else can help.
So crucial to think about. You're right, with these different meanings for different places. I appreciate that. Some people have put in that Patty wrote that they talk about using Mad Libs. I love Mad Libs. My kids went through phases where they love them. And especially my son who loves making silly sentences. And so that was a great opportunity. But another group would like to share. Hey, Erica, go ahead.
Sorry, you guys probably getting tired of hearing from me. I just appreciated in our group that, we have that spread of the ages that we teach and how we all kind of grapple with, well, how does this apply to me? How does this apply to my students? And anybody that's, middle or upper grades, at least up till now, I've kind of been like struggling with, okay, how do I apply this? And this is the first one, like, I know how to apply this. I can do this. And then, I'm back on safe ground again now. Compared to kindergarten, first grade, like, how do I apply this? And I don't know, just appreciating that we all are really grappling and struggling with how do I apply this knowledge to my specific classroom. So I appreciated that conversation.
Well, and it's funny, Erica, you say that your struggle. I was just talking with secondary literacy leaders this morning, and even just sharing with them, having, if you recall these, but notice what I'm doing with them. I'm going to put green around my B and yellow around my H and pink around the A, and remember why. The B only makes one sound. The H can represent lots of different sounds, and the A is just kind of funky because of the vowels. But I said, I put these on my wall even when I taught high school. Now, granted, I taught high school special ed, and maybe I didn't refer to them, but they were there. So if my kids needed them, and nobody really can tell where your eyes are going. I mean, the same thing with the syllable types. This was on my wall when I taught high school. as well as the syllable divisions. Again, maybe I didn't spend a lot of time with them, but they were there in case they needed them. Just those anchor charts for the help them to remind them. So yes, thank you, Erica. And with this is harder for our youngers, our kinders, but this is then you do it more orally for them than you would do it in writing, or you help them understand what's common. And for example, there was a great example I was using for secondary, which was the dog chased the boy with the bone. Who has the bone? The dog or the boy? Good question. So helping our kids recognize when something needs more clarity, whether it be oral or in writing. Michelle's added, it's interesting how different cultures have different understanding about the meaning of content. Someone from a different group or country thinks differently, or part of our country. Michelle, would you like to add a little bit about that? Orally, if you'd like to unmute.
I just work with a student I'm a paraeducator in a middle school, working with a student from Honduras, and he's very intelligent. He knows quite a bit of, he knows a lot about things, about different things. And just telling him something, he'll say something back to me. And I'm like, wow, I never thought about that. So it's kind of interesting.
Thank you, Michelle. It makes me think about that importance of background knowledge and always being aware of the bias that may be in things that we don't recognize. I was giving a test to a high school student who was from Mexico, and there was a sentence that he had to read. This was a standardized test that was something about, so the Great Dust Bowl started raining the Great Dust Bowl started when it quit raining in large parts of, and it listed 3 states. And then the question was, what did the text say? What does the sentence say the Great Dust Bowl was? Now notice it didn't. Oh, Erica, thanks with the Alaska. So no, that sentence didn't say what the Dust Bowl was, and the kid answered a football game. There's the Rose Bowl, the Orange Bowl, and the Dust Bowl, and it started when it quit raining. So hence there's some historical background knowledge that he didn't have because he didn't grow up here in the United States and learning about, the Great Dust Bowl. So we have to think about the background knowledge that our kids do and don't have, and that goes back to that language comprehension. And as we think about writing and reading and the grammatical piece, I want us to keep in mind, I wish I could find at my fingertips this quote, but if your kids can't say a clear sentence, if they can't tell you a story, how can we expect them to write them? So this is where it all starts with oral. So our kindergarten colleagues here, our first grade colleagues here, we are building that oral language. We're building the storytelling. We're building the understanding of complete sentences. We're building the understanding of past. And then we get into it in writing. So last week when we talked about how ED has 3 different sounds, I walked, it landed, and I splattered. There we go, the D. We have those 3 different sounds, but we help explore them and what the kids already know. So today I walked to school every day. Yesterday and the kids know that you mean walked. And you start exploring it and playing with it and understanding it orally, and then you show them the ED, and you're like, you know what? All of those different sounds you made, you said walked, and you said landed, and you said whatever it might be, starched. It's going to be spelled with an ED, regardless of how it sounds. And that makes it easier on our eyes and our brains, even though it's not so easy on our ears and our mouths. So helping them recognize those patterns, let's notice them orally first, because then that gives them something to hook onto when they start with the reading and writing. Okay, let's get into, speaking of writing, this is a great way to help attune our kids to what they're seeing in text. Let's have them do it in writing. So this has become my new thing. I'm finding myself saying more and more again, teaching reading through writing. In fact, Learning Ally is doing a spotlight on dyslexia, and I just got an acceptance on teaching reading through writing, teaching writing to understand and teach reading. So we're going to do an example of this. I need you to get out a piece of paper, please, and something to write with. And you're going to need 2 columns. We're going to do 2 30-second brainstorms. So this is like a 2-minute exercise you could do with your kids. Now, maybe not your kindergartners or first graders, but maybe they could get pictures instead of words and that they sort. Or they could get boxes if you have already pre-made words for them. So this is for your kids who can do some writing. We're going to get into some of this. You all have 2 columns, hopefully on your piece of paper. And on the first column, I'm going to give you 30 seconds on a timer, so don't start yet. And you're going to list all the animals that you can think of in 30 seconds. All right, I'm going to wait to make sure everyone's ready, so I'll continue with the directions. Then after those 30 seconds, you're going to list all the things animals can do. So you're going to have nouns and then you're going to have verbs. So we're going to create some mini sentences. All right, so first off, the nouns, your animals. Ready, go. And 5, 3, 2, 1, stop. Okay, we're going to dismiss that. All right, move on to the next column. Things animals can do. Ready? Go. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, stop. All right, so delete. I'm going to change it to 45 seconds. You're going to create down along the bottom or wherever as many 2-sentence set, just an animal from column 1, an action from column 2. Little mini 2-word sentences. See how many you can come up with in 45 seconds? Go. Five, 4, 3, 2, 1, stop. Okay, so how do we do? How many sentences did you come up with look at all that writing you did in 2 minutes. 2 60-second brainstorms, a 45-second sentence slam. You probably got at least 3 to 5 sentences, I think. Anybody get, I'm seeing some nods. You did quite a bit of brainstorming. There we've got 5. So I bet you, some people got more, fewer. You got a lot of writing done. So now let's help our kids recognize, okay, we've got that's the kernel sentence, right? Birds fly, or dogs bark, pigs oink, whatever they might do, they walk, etc. Now let's help our kids expand them. This is, we're going to start thinking about how sentences get longer and more complex. So we start with that name or that noun, that's what you have, your animals, and you have the action, the verb. So what you have in your case is what animals do. So here's an example. I added and this is actually Margie's, not mine, a pronoun, sorry, a pronoun adjective, an adjectival pronoun, there's the word. In this case, we're calling it an adjective because it's telling me whose dog, my noun, my dog. So we have, instead of dogs heard, my dog herds. Now we're going to start asking questions about that namer, the noun. What kind of dog? How many dogs? Which dog? I'm going to start asking some questions. So I'm going to give you a moment to pick one of your sentences. Add some questions, add some information. I'll give you an example with mine. My dog is Shaggy. My Shaggy dog And I'm going to give some more information. Here's a prepositional phrase. It's a long one. With the brown and white coat. It's also talking about that dog, isn't it? So my shaggy dog with the brown and white coat herds. So I'll give you a moment to add on some descriptors to your noun. Just one of your sentences. Give it a try. Doesn't have to be two like I have. It can be one, whatever you like. Just add on some description. Because then next, when you're done with that, we're going to ask some questions about the verb, the action. Now, I will say adverbs can be a little confusing because when I was telling my daughter the word very is an adverb the other day, she said, what? But it's not talking about the action or the verb. Yeah, I said, yes, adverbs can tell me more about verbs, but it also can tell me more about adjectives. So very excited, extremely excited, a bit excited. You know, in that case, a bit is a noun. A bit is a noun phrase that's actually acting as an adverb describing that excitement. So notice we've got lots of different ways to expand that. So let's look at here. I have my shaggy down with the dog with the brown and white coat. Herds where? Inside the fence. How? With a back and forth motion. When? Every afternoon. Now I notice I didn't say what he's herding. That would be adding on another noun, but my simple sentence, my dog herds, then becomes so much more complex. And my students can help seeing this complexity. They're adding on, but they can deconstruct a complex sentence just the way they constructed this one. So again, teaching them to construct, to recognize how things were constructed so then they can deconstruct and understand them. And notice the color coding shape. I can take, let me get my annotation back up here and get some orange, because if they forgot, well, here's an orange. Shaggy was an adjective. With the brown and white coat was an adjective. Those were both telling me about the dog. Oh, and so was my dog. And I can get my green here because this is, the dog is a thing. And I also see, oh, the fence, here's another thing that's not a good green. We want the other darker green, don't we? And then we have, oh, every afternoon, that tells me how many. Afternoon is a, that's not, afternoon's always a weird one. In the afternoon, that's a noun. And every tells you how many, so that's an where's the blue? We'll keep that adverbial. Every tells me how many. That's an orange one. But notice how this clause works together to be an adverb. Isn't that complicated? And with our preposition, with what? A back and forth motion. Oh, I've got an so a motion. What kind of motion? A back and forth motion. So I have some more adjectives describing this motion. This motion is the object of that preposition with. Again, look at this complexity we have here. Motion with what? With a black and white motion. So you can see this very, very simple sentence became very complex. Is there anyone who would like to share your sentence and how complex it got? It'd be fun to hear one from you. Or two.
I'll share my fairly simple one with you.
Go ahead, Karen.
The striped cat meows loudly.
Excellent. You told me kind of cat, striped. Whoops, I should use orange. And you told me how he meows. Go ahead, Deborah.
The huge orange snake in the aquarium slithers over a shiny black rock in the sunshine.
Oh, see, with the huge orange snake. Where was it? In the aquarium?
In the aquarium.
Uh-huh.
Slithers over a shiny black rock in the sunshine.
So over a shiny black rock in the sunshine, two prepositional phrases telling me where or how. Awesome. Thank you, Deborah and Karen, both for those sharing. Notice how they get more complex. What was that, Robert? You have one too?
No.
Okay, no problem.
I have one.
Go ahead, Nancy.
My 11-year-old gray dog plays with stuffed animals every day in the backyard.
So you told me about your dog, and you tell me when he does this and where he does this. So this is the key piece when I feel like so often we teach prepositional phrases in a vacuum rather than teaching kids that they serve a purpose. It tells me where something happened or how something happened or about. So prepositional phrases are always either adjectival, as in the orange, with the brown and white coat. And I can't remember, one of you had an adjectival phrase too. Was that you, Nancy? Did you have an adjectival phrase? One of you had one. Anybody remember who had an adjectival phrase? Did you, Nancy?
Yeah, my 11-year-old gray dog plays with stuffed animals every day in the backyard.
Okay, in the backyard is an adverbial. I thought somebody had an adjectival as well.
Might have been Deborah.
Deborah, do you have an adjectival phrase?
I don't think so. The huge orange snake in the aquarium slithers over. In the aquarium?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, in the aquarium. Okay.
Because it's describing the snake, isn't it?
Yes.
Now, if you
Okay.
said, I mean, it could be looked at as either adjectival or adverbial because it says where he slithers. But the way you were pausing sounded like it was describing the snake.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So notice it could go either way, but it's a descriptive phrase. It tells me more about something, doesn't it? Thanks, Melissa, for adding one in. The green frog from the pond. There's definitely an adjectival phrase describing that frog. Did what? Croaked loud. Oh, croaked. How loudly? When? Yesterday. Why? Because after he swallowed a bug. So you see how we can keep expanding. And this is when we help our kids recognize that those sentences have a subject, that green and that red, and that phrases, I should have done these in a different order. Phrases can be either noun phrases, verb phrases, adjective phrases, or adverb phrases. So I'm going to do a little bit adding here, though. These ones are your prepositions, aren't they? You had from the pond was an orange one. After swallowing a bug would be a blue one. So Melissa gave us a couple of examples there. But a noun phrase, we saw if I said the interesting little girl. Notice that I have my noun, where's my green here? My noun plus everything after it is my noun phrase. Croaked loudly yesterday after swallowing the bug, that's a verb phrase because it tells me what he did and everything after that as well. So these are helping our kids recognize these building blocks of language to help them recognize that when they have a subject and a predicate, let me get my black here, and they have a subject and a predicate, that's a simple sentence. That's actually, we also call that a clause because it can stand alone. Clauses can be either independent, they can stand alone, it's a complete thought, or if it's dependent, it can't stand alone because, and this, I'm going to put some other tools here. So independent clause, I like to use this kind of font because it's got a stable base to it. I like chocolate. But how many times we have our kids who will say, because I like it? Well, that's fine in speech. But if we start with because, because I like it in writing, that's a dependent clause because it starts with because and it's going to roll over. See, that D is going to roll over. It needs to be held up by another independent clause. So I ate the chocolate because I liked it. Notice how I have an independent clause. I ate the chocolate. Why? Because I liked it. Or because I like chocolate, I eat it every day. Notice how because I like chocolate, I eat every day. So when you tell your kids don't start a sentence with because, it's like, well, be careful. If you start with because, you need to have two sentences joined together to have it be a complete sentence. And then I already mentioned the nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. Okay, we've got a lot going on here, so I want to get us to using them. So I'm going to clear all that off and skip our fanboys. We're going to go right into, when I'm talking about dependent clauses, I'm going to do a little bit about that, is how do we combine these is with, notice I had the because, here are some other words that are, these are called subordinating conjunctions. You might call them adverbial conjunctions. And this can start these other sentences. Because I liked it, I ate it. Before I go on my vacation, I'm going to pack. So these all start in a part we call dependent clause that can't stand by itself. but you can be in the beginning or at the end. These are when, as our words get more and more complex. I have a great example of these in use that I would love a volunteer to read these different sentences for us. And I'll put the link of where I got this video. This is from William Van Cleve and his video on syntax matters. William Van Cleve was a fantastic teacher. Unfortunately, he is no longer with us. Okay, who would like to read these for us? And as our volunteer reads, I want you to think about the difference in meaning changed by just one word. Do I have a volunteer? Thank you,
I'll do
Deborah.
it. While I studied, my sister ran screaming through the house. After I studied, my sister ran screaming through the house. Before I studied, my sister ran screaming through the house. Because I studied, my sister ran screaming through the house. Although I studied, my sister ran screaming through the house. Whenever I studied, my sister ran screaming through the house.
Thank you, Deborah. Any thoughts before you remute on, or any thoughts
Well,
we wanted to add about that? Yeah, I think my feelings about my sister would be very different.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very much so. And these communicate that, right? The different feelings towards the sister. Yeah. And yeah.
But think of a second language learner who might not know the meanings of those orange words and therefore struggle with the different nuances. I mean, we'd have to help them understand that while is at the same time, after, before, well, because that's causal. Although it's like, well, I studied and yet she still did it. Thanks a lot. And whenever, every single time. So helping them recognize the meaning behind those coordinating subordinating conjunctions, not the coordinating. Coordinating we can get to, but if you want a reminder of the coordinating, those are our fanboys. Remember our for, where am I? Bring them all up. For, and, nor, but, or, yet. So this is the other way we can combine clauses. In this case, clauses that are independent. We can, I like chocolate. I eat it every day. Not true, but I wish I did. My body doesn't need that. Notice I can say combine them either with a semicolon or with a comma in one of these. Can I please take a moment and stress that comma, because otherwise it will be run on. And I can't tell you how many of my graduate students would still make that mistake. It needs to be a comma, otherwise it's run on. You'll see error made that with that all the time. Maybe that's a changing aspect of language. It'll be fun to look into that. But it needs that comma and the conjunction. Okay, let's talk about it in use. So, oh, I had one more before we get into the use. These are some adjectival clauses. So the other ones were adverbial. These are adjectival. We call these relative because they start with who or whom, or which or that. And the reason why they're adjectival is because notice they are describing nouns. So this case, like who likes to read is telling me about the boy, isn't it? And this is a clause because I have a subject who and a verb likes. He likes something. But the sentence is, kernel sentence is the boy comes here daily. He comes, here's my subject, my verb, my green noun, and my predicate or my verb comes here. So here's the next one. Now we don't use whom as much in our language. People don't like it. Maybe just don't. It's so we'll just say the girls follows him. The girls he likes follows him. But this is, whoops, that's brown, not my orange. These are again describing those girls. Which girls? The girls whom he likes. So in this case, subject, verb, this is my my relative conjunction, my relative conjunction in this case. In this case, it's acting as a pronoun. My relative conjunction here, or adjectival, my relative conjunction here, oh, but it's acting as an adjective. The topics which, subject, verb, which are irrelevant. Notice this is set off by commas versus that. The topics that are important are not set off by commas because my subject, verb, these are again talking about the topics, in which case. I will say a little bit of a pet peeve when people use which or that for humans. Drives me a little bit crazy because humans, we should use who or whom. But language changes, I have to let it go, right? Okay. We'll clear all that out and let's talk about the use of it when my kids are reading. So when my kids are reading, I'm going to pull out some phrases from the passages that they're reading before they encounter them that I know that they're going to struggle with. And many reasons why I'm going to pull out these passages. One, I want to help them understand grammar and understand how these phrases, number one, work together to form a meaningful unit, but also how they work in the sentences to make sense. So what I'll be doing is I'll pull these out from the text. We're going to talk about them, and I'm going to show you all the steps to going through this, and we're going to actually demonstrate this, and then I'm going to give you an opportunity to practice and talk to each other about the phrases. But and we have a little video about this, all in a little over half an hour, right? Okay, so I've pulled these out from a text, maybe because I want to work with the grammar. Maybe I find some words that I know they're going to struggle with, like the Arthur is weird, or the knights at KN, or because that's a really difficult one. So I want them to get extra practice with some of those words. So I've pulled these from the phrases, from the story that we're going to read with my kids. And then I'm going to go through a process. I have these on the board. Maybe I have them on a piece of butcher paper. Maybe I have them on the whiteboard, maybe whatever. And I get out a little tool or a, what's the word you call it? A yardstick. Because my kids are going to find the phrase and read them over and over and over again before we get to them in text. And then when we do get to them in text and we're reading the book, if they're struggling, I say, oh, remember that phrase? Oh yeah, they had practiced it so much that they can read it more smoothly when they get to it in text. Okay, so how do we practice? The very first thing that we do is I'm going to actually show the steps and then we'll do it, is I'm going to read the phrase and we're going to talk about what kind of phrase it is. That's step number one. And the class is going to read it as well. Notice this rereads. I think initially I was taught the class repeats. The reason why I'm not using the word repeat is because I want my class to pay attention to the visual as well as the auditory as well as the mouth. So if I just said class repeats, you don't have to necessarily be looking at it to repeat, do you? But if you are rereading, you are looking at it too. So that's the first step we're going to do. Then I'm going to read a phrase and my student up at the board is going to find the phrase. So if I said, for example, under the table, the student looks at the phrases, finds under the table, reads it. And if he found the right one, and if he read it correctly, the rest of the class will reread. So it's feedback to him and to me, which maybe after I read it, Karen was quiet and I'd say, Karen, why didn't you read it? And Karen would say, because you missed a word. The phrase is under the brown table. You just said under the table. Great catch, Karen. Let's do that again. So then the next one, I'm going to provide a clue that has to do with meaning. So if my phrase was under the brown table, I might say, find the phrase that tells me where the ball rolled. And the ball rolled under the table. Where did it fall? And then last one, I might say every other one from the top or every other one for the bottom. In the video that we're going to see, she says the second, the fourth, and the seventh. She's building on his auditory memory. So think about whatever your kids need. So I'm going to give you a bit of a practice. Do I have a volunteer? We're actually going to skip the first one in the interest of time, but we'll do a little bit. So for the first phrase, 4,000 years, I might talk with my students, say, okay, that's could be an adjectival phrase or an adverbial phrase. But 4,000 years, that might tell me why or when, doesn't it? And I have that 1,000, that's a unit of time. 1,000 tells me how many years is time. So I have a prepositional phrase that tells me when. Because they gave me pain, that's a clause. Notice we have a subject and a verb in that. And we have that subjunctive conjunction in that because. So because they gave me pain, that tells me why something would happen. And the amount of words I use or the complexity of the words depends on my kids. So with my younger kids, I am not going to use the words subjunctive conjunction. I'm using that with you. But with my older kids, I might say that's a clause, not a phrase. So it all depends on my kids and what I'm going to use with them. The next one, the acts of King Arthur and his noble knights. Notice how those letters are going. That's called italics. And we use that for the names of books. So this is obviously the title of a book because they're using that. And notice too, we have the capitalization. So I'm drawing attention to these features as I'm talking about it. Written or printed, that could be telling me about something, like a book is written or printed, isn't it? Or a story or a song, if you've written it down. And notice those suffixes, en and ed, those are helping me put it into the past. It has been written or it has been printed. Now, the greatest single effort, that's a noun phrase. Notice that starts with the, and the what? The effort. And greatest and single are telling me about that effort, aren't they? And greatest, notice that suffix est we talked about last week, telling me about that's the most. As a child, that tells me when something happens, doesn't it? Okay. I think in interest of time, I'm not going to go through and demonstrate with you, but I'm going to let you watch it with the kids instead. No, I need to demonstrate because I want you to try it too. So I would like a volunteer to unmute. And when I tell you to please find the phrase, we'll first do the step 2 where I just read the phrase, you find it and reread it. Then I'll take another volunteer for step 3 where I'm going to give you a clue and then you're going to find the phrase and reread it. So may I have a volunteer unmute? Thank you, Karen. You ready?
Sorry,
Did you mean to unmute, Karen?
I didn't touch a thing. My screen, everything has been wonky. It's worse than last week.
Well, if you don't want to pass, that's okay. I was going to say, I think that Erica often volunteers as well.
She may go.
All right, Erica.
I can do it.
Who is that?
It's Erica. I can do it.
Okay. Now you can either mark it if you want to when you find it, or I can, whichever is easier for you. So find and read the phrase written or printed.
I'm trying to see if I can find it. There it is.
She's going to indicate it for us. She did. And read it for us.
Written or printed.
Because they gave me pain.
Because they gave me pain.
As a child.
As a child.
I'll give you one more. 4,000 years.
For 1,000 years.
Excellent. All right, I have another volunteer for the clue. Now I'll let you know that the clues don't have to be perfect. And if you make a mistake, if your clue is too vague, you can just say, own it and say, let me try that again. So, do I have another volunteer? Thank you, Deborah.
I'll do it.
Okay. Deborah, can you please find the phrase that tells why I stopped taking my pills?
Because they gave me pain.
Excellent. Let me get the indicator for you. I'll do stamp that one.
Sorry. Okay.
That's okay. Trying to find the indicator that is not. Oh, here it is. I think, did you do the arrow? There you go. It is underneath. There's a spotlight underneath the drawing feature. Underneath that, you'll see other options. Oh, that's a stamp underneath the stamps or the spotlight. Okay.
Okay.
Find the phrase that tells, find the what phrase. It tells what it took to do the work.
What it took. The greatest single effort. Is that, oh, I'm not, for some reason, it's not working for me.
All right, that's okay. I'll find it for you. Find the phrase that tells me how long it stood.
For 1,000 years.
When?
When?
When was I afraid?
As a child.
So notice how it can be a long prompt, it could be a short prompt. Again, you know your students best and what the prompts are. So I'll show, thank you. And then the next one would be, I would take another volunteer to read every other, or just get some extra practice with that. So here are those steps again. Let me clear all that off. And I wanted to give you some practice for trying to come up with some of these clues. But before I do this time, I'm going to actually put this into the Jamboard, and I'm going to let you see it in action with a middle school teacher. And these phrases are not middle school-ish, but the ones you'll see as. And so I'll put this on the Jamboard for you to practice and try after you watch the video, and you can have some conversations about the video, and you can have this practice with this as well. Okay, so let me get the next slide for that. And it is a little bit long, but I'm going to want to make sure that we watch a little bit about each of those steps. And I think it might be a little quiet. I'm not sure, but I'll do the best I can with that. So I will grab the link for those of you who, in case you have any connectivity issues, I'm going to pause the recording. Is Zoom recording? And how did that go? What were some things you talked about? What were some things that struck you, and how did that feel? Who would like to start today?
In my breakout room, on the slide that we were supposed to identify clues with the phrases for Tyrannosaurus Rex. We were just talking about if we were to present this with students, we weren't sure if we would do all of those phrases at once, because we were having a hard time distinguishing between if we were to give them the clue, a who phrase, if we were to go into that step of was it step 3 where you give the clue and they have to? I think it would be really tricky for them to know, obviously, which one we were talking about if we just gave them the clue of who phrase. So then that kind of brought up the idea of, well, how would we then be a little bit more like direct with our, so that it's not like up for debate about which one we're referring to.
Right, like with this middle one, I might say, how did he pull apart the meat with dagger-like traits? And the clues don't have to necessarily have anything to do with the text. It just helps them figure out that, what did he give him their best chance, or when did it take place, or so there's only one when. That's not, but you're right. So if I say tell me a who phrase, and my kids give me something that I wasn't thinking of, I might pull back and say, let me be more specific. I want the who phrase that has a compound word in it, perhaps the biggest meat eater, that meat eater. Or maybe the who phrase that has a superlative. Remember, we talked about the EST being a superlative. The who phrase that is not, let's see, that starts with an article. So whatever way you want to help them start thinking about these, and however, because you're right, you do have multiple who phrases, but you could talk about them differently. Like their best chance, I would actually call that a what rather than a who, because it's what did I give him? I give him their best chance, or I gave them their best chance. A chance is a thing, so I would call that a what instead. Erica, I agree. When you said above the racket, that was exactly what I was thinking too. Is it a where or is it a how? That he had to yell above the racket. That's how he had to make himself heard. But where is the tennis ball above the racket? So that one could be, again, it depends on how it's being used. So in this step, it really doesn't matter which one we choose. What matters is we get the kids to read the phrase above the racket. When we see it in text, we'll figure out which one it's being used. Is it a where or a who? And like you saw in that example when she said in the same way, in normally tells us where, right? But in this case, in the same way tells me how we do something. Oh, yes, Erica, English language learners and all of our idioms, you say by the skin of his teeth, tells me how he did something, but you're right, it should be where. And so these are our as we think about phrases and how we use language, we have to think about idioms tremendously. I mean, I think there's never enough time to tackle everything we want to tackle, but idioms are extremely hard for not just our second language or our additive language learners, our students who are multilingual, but it's hard for our students with dyslexia and who are kids with autism, who might be more concrete thinkers. We really need to think about all the idioms we use and what they mean. Even a fiery gesture, what does that mean? It doesn't have to do literally with fire. It has to do with an explosive idea, but again, it's a colorful language. Thank you. Yes, Dan. Idioms is hard in any language because, I mean, for example, when I was learning French, I had to learn that you could not directly translate. In English, we will, after eating, you say, I'm full. If you say that direct translation in French, it means I'm pregnant. So, you can say a glass is full, but if you use that same word for yourself, it means you're pregnant. So you have to be careful in how we use language is not necessarily as clear as the meanings of individual words. Okay, we have 1 more minute for if there's anybody else who'd like to share something from your group or something that you added on to a reflection, a thought, a summary, any keyword or phrase before we close out. And I do have one more fun little thing. And I'll put this up for us to think about grammar one last time as I'm opening the floor for one last comment. English is, you can place the word only anywhere in that sentence. Only she told him that she loved him. She only told him that she loved him. She told only him that she loved him. She told him only that she loved him. She told him that only she loved him. That's very different. She told him that she only loved him. She told him that she loved only him. She told him that she loved him only. And then some fun with, last time, remember we talked about present and present. We've got content and content, object, object, read, read, excuse me, but there's no excuse. Someone should wind up this post and throw it in the wind. And we have minute and minute. So a bit of fun. Hopefully I got the dates right on this one. I did not. I thought I had everything right on that. So we're just going to skip that to our contact information and some resources. And if there's anybody who'd like to stay for another question or comment or wrapping up thoughts, I am open to that, but do not require it because it is 5:30. And so I will pause our recording. Yes.
We're not meeting next Tuesday, it looks like, correct? Skipping a week?
Yes, that is correct. Thank you for, let me pull that back up as a reminder. Let me go to the PD Enroller link. I saw that up to, let's go to our dates. Thank you for that. Because of the holiday, a lot of people are out of school next week. So let me pull, where did this go? The OSPI one. Here we go. Thank you. We're going to go to this series. Christina, you are on top of it more than I on this one. We are, here's our class open link. And we are going from February 13th. You are right. We have 2 weeks, February 27th, because of the holiday next week. So have a great holiday. For those of you who have a 4-day weekend, fantastic. You're lucky. For some of us get a 3-day weekend. But nonetheless, we have a lot to talk about and think about next time because it's our last time together. So if there's anything you we haven't spent enough time on, please let me know and we'll spend, I can always rearrange and move things. So I'll put the contact back up so you can contact me in between now and then.